Today's daf is daf Kuf Yud Ches. I'll begin with the Gemara on the second line. And just to review, the Mishnah says in the Reisha that if one woman of the two tsaros says that our husband died, the other says, no, I deny it, he's still alive. So each one goes her own way. The one who says my husband died is believed for herself. She's allowed to get married, and she collects her ksuba. And the other tzara who denies that her husband died cannot get married and does not collect the ksuba. So the Gemara is medayik. Taima di amro lo meitz. The reason why in our Mishnah, the tzara who says lo meis cannot get married. Ha'ichdika tinase. The implication of the Mishnah is, had she said nothing, then based on the edus of her tzara that the husband died, she'd be allowed to get married. So the Gemara asks, wait a minute, we learned in the Mishnah Daf Kuf Yud Zayin just the opposite. Ha'ein tzara me'idul chaverta. A tzara cannot be matir her tzara to allow her to get married based on her testimony. One tzara is not believed on the other. So therefore, even if Shaska, even if the other tzara said nothing, what would be the basis for a heter to allow her to get married? It would only be the edus of the other tzara, but the Mishnah says we don't rely on the other tzara. So the Gemara says, Ella lo meis itzrichle. If she was quiet and she said nothing, the tzara, then for sure she cannot get married because one tzara cannot testify for the other tzara. And the Mishnah didn't even have to tell us this. The Mishnah didn't feel compelled to have to spell that out. What is the Tana coming to teach us? That even in a case where the other tzara said lo meis, even then she's not allowed to get married. So the Gemara is now going to work very hard to construct a havamina that the tzara who says lo meis would perhaps be believed, perhaps would be believed sorry, I'm having a little trouble here with this technology. Okay, there we got it. Would perhaps be allowed to get married. Very strange. This is counterintuitive. She says lo meis, my husband's alive, and we're going to allow to get married. On what? On the basis of the other testimony of the other tzara? We don't believe the other tzara as far as she's concerned. So Salketai Techamina, Gemara is doing like detective work to analyze the umdana here. In truth, Ishmael Galia, her husband died. But she says lo meis. She wants to be mekalkel and make it worse for the tzara. Even though by saying lo meis, she herself will not be able to get remarried. That's called Tavutz Nafshi and Plishtin. Right? So Shimshon HaGibor takes down the entire palace there with everybody, including himself. That's what she meant to say. Kamash Malan, no, the Tana wants to say that even in that case where she says lo meis, and we think that she said lo meis in order to be mekalkel her tzara, even so she cannot get married. Now here I want to add the Tosas Yontif and the Meiri, which are brought down in the footnotes of the Masechet. And they're both really trying to analyze the Havamina. He says in the name of the Tosas Yontif, Kevon shemistaber shemishakeres. We have reason to believe that when the Torah says lo meis, she's lying through her teeth. Lo yehi koch b'dibura lesars atzma. Okay, fine. She can't answer herself because we think that she's telling a lie. But here says the Tosas Yantu, Tehe muteres al pi divrei tzarasa shamra beis, afal pisha bi alma einat tzaranem etzlatira. So he asks the kasha, but I don't see the answer to the kasha. How can there be a havamina that will allow her to get married based on the testimony of the tzara when we don't believe the tzara? So you're going to tell me, okay, when she said lo mace, that doesn't register. Okay, it doesn't register, but Lamaisa, she didn't say mace. So I'm going to add in the Meiri, maybe he'll alleviate matters. He says, Achidachu, Shafilu Chazra B'Biachshav. She rescinds her original testimony. She saw that she flopped in her attempt to be Mekalkel the Tzara when she said lo mace. The Omeres, and now she turns around and she says, Achein mace bailit. Now there's a gewaldige chiddush in the Mishnah that once she already admitted that lo mes, that registers, and Shavia Nafshi came into Jehigit Shubere Choser Mak. The Mishnah says, Achas Omeres Meis, Achas Omeres Nerak. So Rabbi Meir sees this as Akasha. There's no way we can reconcile a testimony that the husband died of natural causes with a testimony that the husband was murdered. And therefore we throw out both testimonies. And both are prohibited from getting married, both are. The Mishnah records the dissenting views of Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda. They say no. Both of them agree that a husband died. Fine. And therefore, they're allowed to get married. It's clear that according to Rabbi Meir, a tzara is believed to create an iser on the other tzara. Meaning, as a result of the fact that we believe the tzara, let's take an example, when she says nerag, we therefore reject the edus of the accompanying tzara when she says mace. So the Gemara says, wait a minute, if Rabbi Meir is of the opinion that one testimony of the tzara can answer the other testimony, the other tzara, then liflog Rabbi Meir b'reisha. Why don't we find that Rabbi Meir dissents in the reisha of the Mishnah when one says mace and the other says lo mace? Where the Mishnah says that the one who says mace is believed klape atzma and she can get married. According to Rabbi Meir, no. Since the other tzara says lo mace, she can answer the other tzara. And here we have two answers in the Gemara, one from Rabbi Lazar and one from Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Lazar, you're right. The machlokes is not only in the Seifa, but it's even in the Reisha. And the din in the Reisha is b'machlokes shnuya. But the Reisha only reflects one shita, the shita of Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda, who hold that she's not believed l'gabi the tzara. Rabbi Meir l'shitasa would disagree. He would hold that even the tzara who says mace is not allowed to get remarried because there's akasha from the other tzara who says lo mace. But Yochanan Amar, no. Afilu tema Rabbi Meir. I could explain and reconcile the reisha of this Mishnah with Rabbi Meir. And Baha, in the case where the Torah says lo mace in the reisha, Afilu Rabbi Meir modeh, Rabbi Meir would concede that she's not believed to create an iser on the tzara. Why? D'chol lo mace, b'edus isha, lav hakchashi. When a woman testifies that my husband died, he was killed, then she's coming to be matir herself. She's not coming to create an iser on the tzara. As a result, there is akasha. And Rabbi Meir holds in the Seifa that there's an emunah here to create a suffix, to cast a doubt on the testimony of the other tzara. But if she says lo mace, and she's coming to Asa the Chavrito, she's not believed, even according to Rabbi Meir. And now the Gemara is going to try to find proof that there's at least one Tana out there who holds that she is believed. Tnan, this Gemara is Kash on Rabbi Yochanan. Eid Echad Omer Meis, V'eid Omer Lo Meis. It's at the end of our Mishnah. Ish Omer's Meis, V'ish Omer's Lo Meis, Harei Zu Lo Tinase. And we're assuming now we're talking about two tsaros. So we see that even a tzara who says Lo Meis is believed to be makish har tzara who says Meis. Who is the shita who holds like that? Vishleim Rabbi Lazar, Stamad Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir holds that the tzara is believed to ask to the other tzara. El Rabbi Yochanan holds that even Rabbi Meir is modeh. That a tzara who says Lo Meis is not believed to be makish. The other tzara who says Meis is kasha. We don't have any way of attributing this Mishnah to any shita at all. It's the law of the excluded middle. And now we get to the Mishnah in the middle of Daf Kuf Yud Ches Hamad Aleph. So she goes out to the seven seas, comes back, and she says, Meis Baila. Once she's believed to be mater herself, then Memela she collects the ksuba. Tzaras Hasura. She's not believed to be mater tzara. Now, what we're going to see as the story unfolds is, okay, she's not believed to be mater tzara, but at least can she cast a little bit of a doubt in our minds, even vis-a-vis the tzara, that perhaps the husband died. And that's going to be relevant to Truma. So if this tzara was a Bas Yisrael, now we have the opinion of Rabbi Tarfon, and she was Nesua L'Kohen. So as long as her husband is alive, she's allowed to eat Truma. If we would trust the other tzara who says Mes, and she would eat Truma, then she's Chayav Misa B'dei Shamayim. That's a terrible Isur as a Zara who's eating Truma. Nevertheless, says Rabbi Tarfon, we don't trust the other tzara as far as this tzara is concerned. And therefore, Tochal B'Truma, we're going to assume absolutely that her husband is still alive. We're not going to be choshesh at all for the edus of the tzara who says Lo Meis. Because she's not believed as far as the tzara is concerned at all. Very Rabbi Tarfon. So according to Rabbi Tarfon, when we say that the tzara is not believed as far as the other tzara is concerned, that means period. She's not believed at all. Not even to create a dent of a suffix. Rabbi Akiva disagrees. Omer ein zo derech motziato midei avera. You want to prevent an avera from happening. We have a chashash avera v'achilas truma, but rather ad shetei asura li nase is v'asura milechol truma. What you're telling me that we're going to be machmir on her, we have to be machmir on her in both directions. We're going to say she's asura li nase, meaning her husband is alive, and we're not going to trust the other tzara. But on the other hand, we have to be machmir shasura milechol b'truma. As far as allowing her to get married, the tzara is not believed. But at least let's believe her to create a dent of a suffix. As far as truma is concerned, that maybe the tzara is correct and telling the truth, and the husband did die. And if he died, then the Bas Kohen, the Bas Yisrael, the other tzara, is enjoined from eating truma. So we have to be machmir on both sides. And the same identical machlokas between Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Akiva recorded in the Reish applies now in the Sefer. What's the Sefer? Amra Meis Baili the achar kach meis chami. So she's believed as far as herself is concerned to be matir herself to get remarried based on her testimony that my husband died. But as far as her testimony regarding her father-in-law to testify to be matir her mother-in-law, and she's a kala, she's a daughter-in-law, so she's not believed to say her father-in-law died, allowing her mother-in-law to get remarried. Is tinase v'titol ksuba. So she, based on her own testimony, can get remarried and collect a ksuba. But chamos asura. Why? Because a kala is not believed as far as her mother-in-law is concerned. Even though with the same testimony, she's believed as far as herself is concerned. But now the question is, how far are you going to go with this? Are you going to allow the mother-in-law to eat truma? Haisa bas Yisrael. The mother-in-law is a bas Yisrael married to a Kohen. Tochal b'truma divrei Rabbi Tarfon. Rabbi Kiv Homer ein zu derech motzia midei avera ad shetei asur v'nosei v'asur v'lechol b'truma. You have to be machmer from both studies. So the Gemara asks Utzricha, why do we need both the Reish and the Seifa? This is just a repetition. And the Gemara answers, no, there's a fundamental difference between the two cases. In the first case of the Edis Sarasa, in that case we would think, Rabbi Tarfon, we're not going to pay any attention to the words, to the testimony of the Tzara. And that's why Rabbi Tarfon would allow her to eat truma. We don't believe that Tzara, that her husband died, and the other, as far as the other Tzara is concerned, and therefore she can continue eating truma. Why? Why don't we trust the other Tzara who says Meis Bailey at all? And the answer is because the hatred is a very intense hatred. Mishum de Tzara de Gufa. We have here a Tzara de Gufa. That now, in the case of two tsaros, they have to split the husband in half, take a saw, I don't know which direction, and there's going to be tzara guf, meaning each woman here is going to have to give up her husband for tashmish hamita. So that's a sinah gedola. And we can assume she's mishakeres. Again, it's very odd. We're assuming she's mishakeres, but yet she herself is allowed to get married. Vis-a-vis the tzara, there's an assumption according to Rabbi Tarfon that she's mishakeres. But in the case of chamotza, here we're not dealing with tzaros. The sinah is a limited sinah. Why does she hate her mother-in-law? Because when her husband is not around during the day, her mother-in-law, her husband's mother, will tell all sorts of stories about her. All the things that she sees during the course of the day. So the husband goes out to work at 9, comes back at 5. So the mother-in-law is watching her daughter-in-law like a hawk, and every step she takes, she criticizes her. And when the husband comes back, that's her son, she reveals to her son all these terrible lashon hara about her daughter-in-law. That's not a vaday mishakeres. That's not an intense, profound hatred. Rabbi Tarfon have to be molded. There's at least a suffix that maybe the Tsar is telling the truth when she says Meis Bailey. Hence, her Tsar cannot eat truma if she's a Bas Yisrael. And now the Gemara is going to apply the same logic in the reverse. The iyit marbaha. If we only had the mission as far as Sarah as far as Kala is concerned, and her testimony for her mother-in-law, the Hakam Rabbi Akiva. That's where Rabbi Akiva says that B'Kala Dafka there's a suffix. But in the case of two tzaros, Ema Modi Leil Rabbi Tarfon, there's such an intense hatred that we don't care about the testimony at all when she says Meis Baila. Tzricha, therefore I need both the Reisha and the Seif. I think, just on a very simple level, the lumdus here, again, superficially, this requires who knows how much work, is that there are two ways of defining the edus of Meis Bailey. One is Gufa de Yuvda, right, the Sipra Maisa, and the other is the Gav. The Chiddush here in our Mishnah, and we saw it already earlier on Daf Kuf Yud Zayin, is that when Bezdin accepts the testimony, it's not on the Gufa de Yuvda, it's on the Gavra. What are the results of this testimony? So when Bezdin comes to the conclusion that he died, they can also come to the conclusion that he didn't die, because the Edus is accepted vis-a-vis the Gavra, and each Gavra is now a separate Edus. So in effect, when one Tzara says Meis Baila, there are two different Edios here that are inherent in that one single Edus. She's testifying on herself that she's allowed to get married, and on her Tzara that she's allowed to get married. Bezdin will be Makabel her Edus L'gabe Atzma, but not L'gabe Tzaros. Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel Lochik Rabbi Tarfon, and the Tzara is allowed to eat Truma. We don't pay attention at all to the testimony of the other Tzara who says Meis Baila. Omar Abaye Afanan Tanina. I want to bring you a raya from a Mishnah later on here on Daf Kuf Yud Ches Amud Beis. In the case of an Isha Sholcha and Baila and Binas Hayam, and they didn't have a child, she was Bechezkas Kuka L'Yibum, that if her husband would die, she would fall for Yibum. And then she says, Nitam li ben b'Binas Hayam. I had a son when I was out there in the seven seas. Meis b'ni v'achakach baili. My original chazaka was that I'm not zkuka liyavam because I went out without a child, and I'm still not zkuka liyavam. No, I'm sorry, but now he's. No. Let me get it again. Yeah, my original chazaka was I was zkuka liyavam because I didn't have a son. And now, too, even after I have a son, my original chazaka is still in place because, unfortunately, tragically, my son died. And afterwards, my husband died, and therefore, I'm zkuka liyiv. Nemenis. She's believed to be mater herself to the Yavam. Why? Because she didn't undermine the chazaka. She just reiterates and strengthens the original chazaka that she was zkuka liyiv. But if the other thing happens, the exact reverse, and she says Meis Baili, the Achach Meis B'ni, and she's being matter herself to the shuk, ain't in a menace because now she's undermining her chazaka. Her chazaka was that she's zkuka liyibo. She went out without a son. And therefore, if she's zkuka liyibo, she has an Isur l'shuk. She cannot be believed to undermine that chazaka by saying that my husband died first and my son second. But v'choshin lidvareh. However, since she admits that she's asur liyavam, because meis baili v'achakach b'ni, so that means her brother-in-law is asur be'isur kares v'isur chamer v'eshesach, is therefore choletzes v'lo mesyaberes. We're not going to allow yibum. Because by her own admission, this is eshes ach shelo b'makom mitzvah, because her husband died and only afterwards her son died. Says the Gemara, if we're medayik carefully in the Lashon of Mishnah, it says choshin lidvareha. What's the addition of lidvareha? It's a kind of a mute. Lidvareha, from the testimony of herself, on herself, hu dechoshishin lahachmir. Holidirei Sarah, Hameido lechaverta shenita lo ben umeis liachar misas habal harei asur liyav. Ein choshin leidus haklal afilu lahachmir shmamino alocha k'Rabbi Tarfon. So we see that we're going to be ignore the Edus completely when she says that Bailey died first and then my son. which would mean that she's generating, when she says, my husband died first and then my son, she's generating an Iser Yivum, and Ein Choshima. Even Lahachmir, we're not going to be Choshesh, and in event that the husband's dead, finally, eventually dies, then she falls for you. And this leads us to the Mishnah on Daf Kuf Yud Ches Amid Al.